3, 2.
Hello, Graham.
Wonderful to see you again. Just terrific. And
You
I
too.
love the background.
Oh, thank you. For those of you who don't know, we have a Patreon page, which is a monthly donation service, which allows you to give us a little bit per month, which lets us know that you guys are invested this program continuing and gives us the time to do so. So that is patreon.com/T3. Thank you so much to everyone who is already over there. And if you could go over there and check it out, that'd be great. So I feel like after last week, we should almost start every episode, or maybe this is what I've started doing at least, is right before we start recording, is just like take a couple deep breaths.
And you in our audience, you should be doing this at the same time so that we're all ready for it. Okay.
It feels kind of silly now that I know we're recording, just taking a deep breath. Welcome back, everyone, to Tea at 3, Looking for Good. So in this idea, Looking for Good, where we've talked a lot before about how there is a lot to wade through to get to good oftentimes, and it can be a lot of work to get through to that attitude. Part of the reason why I have this background of a tree behind me is that, so a long time ago, I think I mentioned to you, I bought some old furniture at an auction. So I got just like more furniture than I could use for a decent price, because it was just the lowest bid or whatever bid I was willing to make. And it sat in my garage for a long time, and I was thinking for the stuff that I wasn't going to use that I could sell it, but some of it was pretty beat up. And so I wanted to fix it, but I didn't particularly know how, but I do have a decent amount of tools. So I kind of looked up the best way to start restoring. What I had specifically in mind was, it was a living room set. So it was a coffee table and 2 end tables that were matching. They had like the same drawer handle and the same kind of slats on the side. But the sides of them were pretty okay, but the tops of them were pretty beat up. And so, because I knew I didn't need them, I was thinking, okay, I'll sell this, but I want to make it, it was like, it's really solid oak furniture, like really, really solid wood. And I know you know a lot more than me, but like furniture just isn't made like it was used to. Furniture, especially, amongst many other things in the world, but furniture especially isn't made as solid as it used to. And so finding pieces like that are very, very solid wood, I felt they deserved to be like nice again and valued. So it was too cold to go out into the garage, so I brought them up inside, and then I would put them out on my deck, and I put a paint stripper on them so that it would strip off the varnish and some of the stain, hopefully. And I got that most of the way off, and then I scrubbed it off with some steel wool, got the rest of it off. And then I had to scrape some more of it off with like a brush, a steel tongue, like not for a toothbrush, but like the ones that have steel on them. I scraped the rest of the finish off with that, and then I sanded it, and then I had to go to the store and find the same stain as the base, because I just sanded off the top. And so I took like 20 minutes trying to pick out the right color, and I don't think it matches exactly, but I got pretty close. And so I brought it back and I stained it, and then I waited, and then I put the first coat of finish on it, and then I waited, and I put the second coat of finish on it, and then I waited. And this whole time I wasn't that excited to work on it, because this is kind of the first time I've done this specific process. I've made furniture before and I've worked on stuff like that before, but refinishing something wasn't something I'd done before. And so I wasn't sure if it would work. I wasn't sure if anyone would want to buy it from me. I wasn't sure if it would be worth all of the trouble, especially since between each process, it was like, put the stripper on, wait a while, take the stripper off, put the wood filler on, wait a while, sand the wood filler down, sand the rest of the finish. You know, it was like there were lots of like waiting periods within, and it was just kind of a tedious process. And especially because I didn't particularly know what I was doing ahead of time. I didn't know the right order to do things in. And so sometimes I would do things in the wrong order and then have to wait another 24 hours for something to dry. But then it finally, everything was done, and it looked like I was genuinely impressed. Like the sanding down all of the old junk and the stains and like getting all that stuff out and like refinishing the wood actually made it look really nice and like shiny and clean and refinished, and like gave this really nice solid wood piece like the finish that I think that it deserved. And I actually was able to sell it for like what I paid for all of the auction furniture that I bought. I was able to sell it for more than that. And so not only was it worth my time to do financially, but also I was able to like bring value back to a piece that had been discarded, and a piece that was something that like came from a big solid piece of nature, was crafted well, and like deserved to be valued again. So that was a process of like digging through something that was kind of tedious. Wasn't sure if I really wanted to keep doing it, but then it like literally and metaphorically paid off. So that was my week of like digging through something and finding good in the end.
Yes. When you finished it and looked at it, and you know, I was sitting here hoping that you were now going to show us the piece, but you've sold it. So
I have a picture. I'll post it. Try and post a picture on the Patreon, maybe.
Okay, that would
Send
be
it
wonderful.
to you too.
Because as I've been sitting here listening to your enthusiasm and having engaged in that, and all of the new work that you were doing for the first time to recover something which was inherently valuable, especially a few years ago, and how incidental and poorly assembled, usually with staples sometimes nowadays. Gosh, what a metaphor for the age in which we're living. Because if we're looking for good from the very latest things that are coming out, they're not that much good compared to the original. So we have a constitution, and now we have a change of administration. And there's a blizzard of special orders coming out of the White House. I've forgotten how many there are now. But a lot of those are dealing with climate, right? So we had a climate here 200 years ago, and we have a different climate today than we had maybe 40 years ago. And in 60 years' time, when you're my age, in 2080, 2081, what is it going to be like unless we get back to valuing what we had in the beginning and trying to strip down once again and restain so that we've got something like the quality of a climate that we used to have? And I think it's well worth thinking about. And I'm so very grateful that you took the time to tell us what you went through with a piece of furniture, because we in our nation are a piece of furniture, and we should value it, and we should care about it, and we should see it restored. You used that word about 3 times, restored. So I'm really into restoration because of you. I'm going to see you and your kids, if you have them, particularly your kids, if you have them, facing situations that the world has only thought about in movies and the odd book. You know, a wasteland rendered once was fertile and beautiful has grayed out and become dusty and water resistant, if you will, or if you can find any water. So as I was preparing today, as you have, and as we never chat about this before we're going to start, which is just, I love it. I truly do like this business of skating on thin ice. It's just lovely. So I've been thinking more or less the same lines, but in a slightly different way, as you can imagine. And I went back to Pebbles. Now, not Pebbles in a river, but the dog Pebbles. And that was a female lab, a chocolate-covered female lab that was owned by my daughter, Tessa. And she came complete with her lab to stay with us in Washington State, right the way across the nation. And the lab was just frisky as all get out, ears peaked up. And the thing that lab liked to do, because it was part of its nature, was run after a stick. So I would throw the stick down the bank where we lived into some rough grass where it disappeared. You couldn't see it lying on the thing. And Pebbles would charge down that hill, even leaping through the air at one stage. And she would run backwards and forwards, sniffing out the smell of that stick. Now, sometimes when she pulled the stick several times, her own saliva was on it. She could smell that. But the first time I would say it was my scent on that stick that she was trying to locate. And she found it and brought it straight back up the hill and stood there going, holding the stick. And I had to wrestle with it a little bit because that's the game. And then I would pick it up again, and she's like this. She's poised, ready to go. And the moment that she was already running and looking over her shoulder, even though I hadn't thrown it yet. So then I threw it the other side, make it more difficult, and she found it. Every time she brought it back to my feet, right? It was a game we were playing together. Now, I suffer from metaphors all the time. So I was thinking about that today with all of these special orders coming out of the White House. They're like sticks being thrown down the bank, all right? So the ones which have a climate aroma to them, we hear about them and we're going, I like that. And you run after that stick and you bring it back and you say, yes, I can get behind that one. Or no, I really can't get behind that one. We'll make choices. For example, if we've got one of them at the moment, the cancellation of the pipeline that's coming from Alberta through to Texas, that carries some of the thickest, heaviest, most polluting oil, it's oil sands, recovered oil sands in the world. So you could say that that's a little more dangerous than most, but it's still fossil fuel. So you then get somebody who says, but the economy of Canada is so reliant upon those oil sands that it's really a very hard thing for our Canadian neighbors to do that. So that's another stick, you see, thrown down there, which is, I care about my neighbors. They're my Canadian friends and things like that. Am I really sure? So we hunt for that stick and we bring that back. We drop it at somebody else's feet. Because whenever anyone tries something relatively new, it dislodges or disturbs somebody who's got something pretty well set. All right. And they're sure that that's good for them. I used to work for a guy who owned a coal mine. And he had a big coal mine. And we had a little hotel in the country in England. And so he owned us. And when if he was told to limit his coal production, that would have affected us. It's a direct line. There's nothing in this world when we make a change that doesn't disturb somebody else. So we're getting a number of messages through the media at the present moment that are thrown for us to be able to pick up and take back and keep on coming back to that media source because they are saying the things that we want them to say. My friend with the coal mine, and I don't want to hear any more about coal thing. Don't you understand? It's people's life. And the other people is, this is a pollutant. And somehow we have to come, and there's an adjustment between the one side and the other. And you and I have to choose. We cannot run after two different sticks. And so we do, and we bring it back. So I think nowadays it's hugely important that we ask ourselves the question, who is throwing the stick? Because we, the people, are eventually the government. It's we, the people. And eventually we decide which way things are going to go. And at the moment, we're really on a cusp with regard to our future and our climate, because we are being thrown a fossil fuel, perfectly reasonable to lobby for the continuation of that. But it's also perfectly reasonable that science is saying, if you do, you're going to kill you. You're going to kill the planet and each other. Now, what do we do? And are we prepared, like you and I are talking now, to talk outwardly about it and not just sort of say, well, this is my attitude. Is it worth talking about? Not hitting each other with a stick, but talking about.
Yeah, I think it's it feels like our Earth needs a specific diet to be healthy, you know, like we need to feed it the right things in order to go on. Whereas it is difficult to make the choice to eat quinoa versus a hamburger or something, you know, like that choice. These choices aren't easy choices to make, but the consequences are dire. Like there are real consequences, even if those consequences are not in that moment, and you might not even see those consequences, and you won't know that like 30 years ago the decision that I made to eat quinoa instead of a burger is why I'm still alive now. You're not going to think about that one individual choice that you made that long ago, but like that will be something that impacts your life, as like filling our earth with harsh chemicals and fossil fuels and things like this will be something that impacts all of our lives as a collective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I could be excused at 87 years of age for saying, maybe I have 8 to 10 if I'm really healthy left to go. And within that period of time, I'm really not going to see that much change. But as I sit here and share with you, you are going to see that much change. So am I interested enough in your future to join you in being quite energetic about change today? Because if the elders, the apparent settled in our way people, are prepared to get out of our settled way and find that stick which is thrown, which tells us there's trouble coming, then I'm going to tear up and down that hillside and pant us all to get out, but I'm going to be energetic because of what faces you. So that could make you feel like you've got some support and are not having to carry the full weight of this and wondering, really, is my choice of quinoa versus hamburger really that important? And the answer is, my darling, for the human race and survival, it means everything.
Yeah, I've had friends before say, like when I tell them that I'm vegetarian, say like, oh, what's the point in me not eating meat? What's one person gonna make the difference if like everybody else isn't doing it, you know? And I'm just like, well, it's like that's even more of a reason that you should be one person, because if nobody else is doing it, then at least like one person is doing it. So like similarly with like supporting ideas towards a healthier climate, like even if nobody else is doing it, like that's even more of a reason that you should be involved. And then to see that other people are also encouraging it within that idea is like even more encouraging to continue. So
yes.
yeah.
And you know, I think when you talk to one other human being and give your rationale behind it, you are communicating the possibility of continuous change. We think somehow that we've got to go on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram in order to be able to let the world know what it is that we're decided to do. But honestly, like in our program, we don't get to very many people to speak to. And yet each time I get to speak to you, you influence me, and I think sometimes, occasionally, I influence you.
Yeah.
And not so very months ago, I turned from being a meat-eating fellow to a vegetarian because of you. You spoke that out. Your quinoa decision over hamburger affected me, and mine then overflows from me to others. There is something that's happening that's changing, and it can be one-on-one. It's okay. It doesn't have to be 20 million people watching.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't. So I just want you to know that. It's I've got a tree outside my house at the moment, which is something like yours, but an arborist said that this maple tree, it's a broadleaf maple, is about 87 or 88 years old.
Hey.
So I go and look at this giant thing with this huge trunk and leaves like this, and thinking, that's my age. That's my age. And it's probably going to fall over one day like me. But it is such a joy to see at the moment. And I like the thought that maybe I could be a joy if some people who actually were listening would do something about it because they valued what was being said. They were listening and saying, it's not just enough to hear something that I like the sound of. This may be for me to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of your biggest influences on me is just like in general being encouraged to be more introspective. And I have a lot of very introspective friends. And so like having practice with you is actually like deepening my friendships, because I am more willing to just like have a serious conversation and like bring up difficult topics and just like talk about it. And know that that's not something that's gonna like end a friendship, that it can be something that is just a conversation that both people get something out of and you move on, you know?
Yeah. And so I think we've got to sniff the stick that is being thrown and ask who threw it and what's the purpose behind it. That's my role for the next week. I'm going to be studying each one of these special directives coming out of the White House. And I'm going to say, well, who threw it and why? What's the consequence? What's the disturbance? Who's going to be lacking from this? And in the eventual analysis, is this good for our world or not? And I think that's the common good for people. We've got to be able to trade with one another. We've got to buy and we've got to sell, and we have to be taxed and all of those things. That's our modern life. But how can we do it by actually causing a little less harm as we do it? Just a little less, each one of us, and pass that on. So
yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
7 billion people caused a little less harm.
Yes, a
That would
little
make
less.
a huge difference.
Just a whisper.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. This has been Tea at 3 Looking for Good. I am Faye Schmidt. This is Graham Kerr, and we will see you next week.
Bless you. Just 1 minute before you cut him. And I want to say thank you, Mikkel, and thank you, Nancy, for sending this check to us for the program. I promise you it's going to be well used.
Thank you so much, honestly.
Yeah.
And also, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so and like this video if you enjoyed watching. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Bye.